Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Welcome back, friends.
Hello.
We're here on another lovely Saturday. We took that week off. I was over at Q, and I did not wear this, but when I was at Q, they gave out cute little Q hats. They knew that I was coming.
Look at that.
Yeah,
That's
isn't it
so
good?
nice.
It's a good little tan. There's a few other things that they gave away that my daughter Riley, she just took. She was like, oh, pens, pencils, little knick-knack things. So I'll be sure to sport that hat in the future.
I got you a hat.
So you like this hat?
I love that hat. But I got you a hat last weekend.
Oh, where is it? Why isn't it here?
It's in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Really appreciate that. I do love this like Peaky Blinder vibe.
Love that hat.
You know, I do need to order more. That's an Amazon thing that I might work on today. But yeah, so that was my weekend last week. That's why we took the week off. You know, I was out at Q speaking, presenting, making friends, doing all of that good stuff. Though I will say, Sophie, this morning I was on my morning walk, right? As I do Saturday mornings. And I was like, wait a second, I think Sophie was on another pod as a recent. So I pulled up it was your recent you're on the High Tech podcast again. Again. But just super good job, by the way. Like when I first started listening to it, I'm like, they're gonna have her talk about QR codes this whole time. But it was actually cool. I was like, whoa, she's breaking down cross-curricular stuff. She's talking about like community involvement. It was like all of it. And I was like, oh, thanks.
It was amazing. It was really amazing. But like just chatting with those guys, this is really amazing. Which, speaking of two guys, we've got two guys here with us today. Yay! They're co-authors of Graham and Gran Save the Summer, right? Yeah. Steve actually was on top of it and read part of the book this morning.
I love me a book club. A book club, I'm down for a book club. So Dan, Steve, by the way, there's two Steves in this whole thing. So we're gonna have to figure that out over the course of the next 40 minutes, I'm sure. But I love myself a book club. So if you all need another guy, I'm there. Yeah,
I'm an audiobook girl, but I did leaf through it and I was like, oh, this is kind of like skimmed kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like Graham and Gran really do save the summer with media literacy. Yeah. But to get things kicked off here, Dan, tell us about your education journey.
Oh gosh. Okay. So my education journey was I was sitting there graduating from college with absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, and the commencement speaker at my graduation was none other than Stephen King, the master of American horror.
No way.
Yeah, it was really cool. And you know, people give these graduation speeches, and I imagine that they think, yeah, I'm just standing up there, providing color for the day, but nobody's going to remember it. But it had like a really profound impact on me. As a matter of fact, he got up there, not to get too morbid, but he's a horror guy, so he got up there and he just started listing off statistics of how many of us would be dead in a year. How many of us would be dead in 5 years, 10 years? And the point was, get started on what you want to do right now. Like, don't think you necessarily have until later. And I sat there and I thought, like, well, what do I want to do? I guess I want to be a teacher. I guess that's really what I want to do. When I was in high school, Steve and I met in high school. We've been friends since then. And people would always say, I'd get going on some topic and they'd say, Dan, you should really be an English teacher, which they meant, please stop telling us about this book. We're overloaded. But so I did. So I went and I started working as an English teacher at a small independent school out here in Northern Virginia. the GW Community School. Shout out to them. It's an amazing place. And I was a high school English teacher there for 17 years. And then I just, I was getting into my 40s and I wanted to see kind of what else was out there. Maybe consider going and teaching at the college level. I went and I got a master's degree in literature. But when I was in the process of getting that, I just took a bunch of classes that really got me interested in children's literature, specifically in writing, thinking about children's literature. And that was something that I had actually, even when I was back in high school, in college, I had been interested in, and got to take a class from wonderful Nancy Willard, who had won the Newbery Medal and was just an amazing children's book author. So I went and I got that degree, and then COVID hit in the middle of that degree, and I saw what a need there was for, kids were just really suffering, and just really not getting what they needed, and we all know, like, incidents of depression and anxiety just skyrocketed during that period, and so I kind of changed course at that point, and I went and I got my master's degree in social work. And today I'm a therapist in private practice, and I work with adolescents and young adults, and also some adults. But adolescents and young adults are sort of like my area of interest from having been a teacher. So that's kind of my
Hey, folks, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's a tough act to follow. So one thing you should know is that Dan and I went to high school together years and years and years ago. And we both similarly are big English nerds, really liked reading, really liked writing, tried to write something together all the way back then. I went off to college and I studied journalism. I was an English major, I should say, but I think I added it up. It was like 60 hours a week of my time was spent at the student newspaper. So it was like having a side job plus. And I left college. I went to grad school for journalism. I started work as a reporter. It was terrific and stressful and wonderful. But ultimately, I started to feel like I loved writing about communities, but I wanted to help build one. I felt I didn't get a chance to do that as much as a reporter as I was hoping to. So I made a decision that you can kind of only make, I don't know, when you're young and foolish enough not to have enough bills to worry about, where I said, what, I'm going to pause doing this and figure out what I want to do. And I didn't know what was next. And actually, it was a conversation I had with Dan. Visited him in Philadelphia at the time. And he's like, you should consider teaching, Steve. Similarly, people had always been like, oh, you should be a teacher. And, I hadn't really thought about it in that way. And so I went, came home, spoke to my mother, a teacher for many, many decades. I'm like, Mom, I think I might want to try this teaching thing. And she's like, don't do it. Whatever you do, don't do it. Don't do
it. That's what I say.
And in fairness, she's retired now, and she had a successful and wonderful career. And in a fit of rebelliousness, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try it out. I actually tried substitute teaching, and I loved it. And I was like, oh my God, if I love being a substitute teacher, walking into like a high school I've never been at before and teaching English class for the day, I'm like, I bet that I will love this every single day. And that was a good bet. So I became a teacher through a program in New Jersey called Alternate Route, which basically means I hadn't gone to ed school the way that a lot of folks have. And there's probably pros and cons to that, but started teaching both English and journalism, and did that for many years at a school in Jersey City called University Academy. And then after 5 years at a school called North Star Academy, which is a part of a larger network called In Common Schools, which is where I still work. And like Dan, I did it for many years, advised the student newspaper, also taught English, loved every minute of it. Got to a certain point where I'm like, I want to see what additional things I can do. Got an additional master's degree, and then sort of moved into the work that I'm doing now, which I direct literacy. I'm one of our literacy directors in the program, which is a cool job. It means I think about books all day. I get to coach teachers all day. I get to coach principals all day. I get to look at student writing and think about what would be most helpful for our students to make their writing and thinking even stronger, and talk to other really smart people, way smarter than me, about it, and get excited and passionate and read research and share what we learned from research. And I just get to do that and kind of work both within our own schools, and also I visit other schools and do the same thing. So that's kind of the winding journey to where I am today, which is still thinking about reading, still thinking about writing, still very much committed to the great work of love that is education, the love for our kids and love for a better future we can build for and with them. That's where I'm here.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I love all of that. Like you both have like same passion, but like your roads, like your journeys were very much have taken you to different places, right? Like from the social work thing to what you're doing now.
I will say that, you know, I don't know if you can tell, we're talkers. and I would say just about as much as anyone, the person I talk to is Steve, and the person he talks to is me. And so even though, you know, there are times that we've sort of like been involved in different aspects, we've always been really together. I mean, not a week, a month goes by without us talking to each other. And it's usually, you know, 70-80% education and 20% jokes. So yeah, it's you know, we have like just we really I've learned a lot from Steve. I've learned a lot from him. Even when I was a teacher, I had the opportunity to visit him at North Star and see how they did things there. And that was like one of the most important moments in my sort of journey as an educator. Like it leveled me up in ways that were just really, really wonderful. Seeing just they put so much explicit thought into instruction and education and the educational environment and all of it. And I had been kind of, you know, flying by the seat of my pants, just sort of like, you know, building the plane while I was flying it. And so looking at this, like, you know, this whole group of people, you know, just like really, really, really super smart people, who had kind of thought about each element. I just stole so much. I just stole a whole bunch from them. And it made a tremendous difference in my ability to, you know, to educate kids. So, you know, I think have always liked that. And, you know, more recently, most of our discussions have been about media literacy education, just because that's such a huge area of conversation in education today. Kind of like trying to preserve sort of traditional literacy, you know, book literacy, but also just think about all the other things that our kids are interacting with and how it's shaping the way that they understand their world and understand how to communicate about their world and things like that.
Which, yes, to all that, right? That's a good segue, because I want to make sure we have ample time to talk about the book, and because for everyone listening, I was that student where I started reading this thing at about 4 a.m. this morning. I was like, oh, who's up next on the pod? Oh, dang, it's Dan and Steve. I started reading. I got about this morning. I got about halfway through the book. So apologies, I was able to get through the whole thing before this chat. But as I was reading, I kind of wrote down a few things that, and I'm going to go over like these things that you were weaving in to this book that I think is like the most impressive part about it. It's a children's book from what I could tell, but the things that you're teaching in it effortlessly, of just like, if I was trying to think of like if I was a kid reading this, picking this up, what I would be learning and not even realizing that I'm learning it. As an example, you're so effortlessly just, you're teaching claim evidence reason throughout this whole thing. I was like, oh, that's hot. That's cool. Like and the way it gets taught. I think like there's a level of pedagogy in it that I really appreciate, in the sense of like they're very cleverly peppering in like almost like timestamps of like, here's your checking for understanding, here's your little puzzle that you have to solve, and then it's almost like it tips, like it's so cleverly just moves them into the next transition of the book. And digital literacy, you're teaching PII, which we were joking about earlier. I didn't even know what PII was until I worked for an ed tech company. Like I didn't know what that was as a teacher, right? AI. But here's the most important part to me. It meets the learner where they're at with the relationships, with like, here's the sibling dynamic and what that may look like in modern day, the relationships between Graham and Gran, and what does that look like? And hold on, because there's actually a funny line in the book. I'm sorry, I'm going to let you two talk right now, like, and you can dive right into it. But the best line that I came across, will the real Graham and Gran please stand up? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be friends with these two. Like I just saw their humor. I saw your, you know, like just like your take on how you would like deliver this content, but doing it in such a meaningful way. Okay, I'm done. That was kind of my piece on just what I've experienced this morning, just reading this book, or at the very least the first half of it. Just well done, gentlemen. Dan, like just maybe you go first, but like kind of where you started with the book, and maybe give us like your insight into how this is supporting kids and families.
Sure. Well, so first of all, you know, Steve and I, like one of the things that we bonded over immediately was our sense of humor. You know, we have a wider circle of friends that we share. In fact, one of them, Andrew, was one of the people that edited this book as well. So it's like there's like the whole high school thing going on, and Steve is well known in our group as being just about the funniest person that any of us have ever met. I don't want to put him on the spot, but it's true. We've laughed more about him from him than just about anyone. But you know, there was a sense of humor that we shared right from the beginning. So we actually tried to write a book when we were in high school. And you know, they say like, write what you know. The only thing we knew was how to be annoying. So the book was about how to be annoying. And we never finished it. But you know, it was always sort of there in the background as something that we kind of wanted to do. And you know, as we kind of had these conversations, it was always, I don't know, I think that we always both knew this was going to happen eventually. So you talked about like, I love what you said. I was very pleased and gratified, you know, when you brought up the pedagogy, just the way that it's so thoughtfully woven into the book. And that's all Steve. Like that's 100% Steve. He's just a master. You know, lesson planning master, just like a pedagogy master. You know, one of the things that we talked about right off the bat was that, you know, the book is a book that educates, but we also wanted it to be a book for educators. And part of what that meant was thinking carefully, not just about what we wanted to teach, but the order that we wanted to teach it in. You know, how it is that we wanted to unroll the different concepts and kind of like start from basic principles and then get a little bit more complicated, and throw in stuff like PII. So, you know, the first chapter is almost just like a basic literacy thing. That there's a puzzle for each chapter. And the puzzle in the first chapter just asks the reader to kind of go back and reread some of the stuff that they saw in that first chapter, you know. So that's like real basic, like just like rereading for information. And then it just builds from there, you know, PII and algorithms and all of these different things. So that was a really important aspect. And then you know, why this book? I don't know. We just partly I will say we just would call each other up. We'd be like, I have an idea, and then we'd just see how hard we could make each other laugh. And when we both started laughing, then that's when we knew we had something. And that's kind of where we went. So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking off the top of my head. Steve, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Dan knows I always have something to say. First of all, I hope it's probably clear that Dan's incredibly humble and also incredibly brilliant, and one of the best like conversationalists you'll ever meet, and has like some of the most interesting ideas you'll ever hear. And that's why it's just this to a large degree, working on this book was just an extra excuse for us to be on the phone even more and talk about whatever we wanted to talk about. And I would say, followers of your podcast might say, like, I think of the two of our dynamic, I'm probably more of the Sophie of the two of us, and Dan's probably more of the Steve, just in terms of the way that we approach things. So, yes, I'll be sitting there with the well, the chapters, if we reorder the chapters, then the pedagogy will build in this way. And Dan's the voice who was like, Steve, you just had a 7-year-old give this line. Like a 7-year-old wouldn't say it this way; they'd say it this other way. And he has just this deep knowledge of the way kids think. Both of us from our experience as educators, but also Dan from his work right now as a social worker. For anyone who's uninitiated with Graham and Gran, it looks like this. It is it's called in circles middle grade, which is weird because like middle grade actually means like late elementary, early middle school, if you're thinking about like what ages. So like chapter book age, the age you were when you read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Encyclopedia Brown. And in fact, it was like those experiences for Dan and I that we were trying to replicate. Like I thought about, Dan is a father now of many years, and I'm a father of 2 years now. And we worked on this just as I was becoming a father. And I thought a little bit about like, what were like the most magical, best experiences that like, what could I give to my son at some point in the future? And what could Dan give to his daughter? And we just thought about like that magic of like reading a book with a parent on your bed, or reading something in school where it's like whimsical and fun and weird. And I remember reading Phantom Tollbooth and being like, these are my people. They're weird in the way that I'm weird. Like I like to make puns. This book likes to make puns. Like it's okay to make puns. It's okay to, I wanted that. And there's just not as much out there. So I'd say like, if you want a tagline for Graham and Gran, it's like, come for the story, stay for the pedagogy. We were trying to do two things, right? We wanted to build a book that is just like a big bear hug to everyone who reads it. That's just fun on its own merits. It's a good story on its own merits. And additionally, we wanted a book that would get families and classrooms talking about things that, like, let's be honest, we are like multiple decades behind on. Like AI is here, y'all. AI is here. You can't do the fingers look right? Like that's not going to work. We're living in the future and we haven't figured out media literacy, right? And to Dan's point earlier, like we talked, Common Core came out, we talked about text complexity, and we talked about whether we're reading tough things with kids. But text can be complex in ways other than just like their vocabulary and their lexile or knowledge base. Like text can also be complex because they're coming at to you on Insta from a friend, and they're full of misinformation, right? And our kids need to be ready for that. And there's just like maybe it will surprise folks and maybe it won't, but like we start to look at what was out there. There's a ton for high school. There's a ton for like 8th, 9th grade and up, ton for college. And it's like we're pretending that kids aren't online in late elementary, that they're not online in early middle. And we're like, whoa, kids are online way earlier than our generation ever was. There's tons of this great research from Pew about like, I think I forget the percentage off the top of my head, but some huge percentage of like 3 or 4 year olds have already been on YouTube, like all.
Oh, looks like we lost Steve.
Oh my gosh. It was like the
I'm
best
here.
part too. Oh, there you are.
I'm back. I'm coming to you from my attic and sitting on my router. So apologies if it ever drops out. I'm trying my best here.
No, you're good.
I don't even know what was the best part. In the short version is like we realized that like kids they're just like, we can't like pretend that kids don't go online until they're like 9th graders. That's silly. It's not true. It's not the world we live in. And what we also can't do is just try to scare the hats off them, if you will, just by like terrifying them about what's on the internet, because they're already on the internet. They know there's a ton of cool stuff on the internet. Like we can appeal to kids a sense of wonder and curiosity, and also savvy, and create an experience reading with them where they're actually like thinking for themselves and making better, safer decisions without trying to tell them don't go on the internet, because they're already there and we're already there and they see us there. So like, I don't think that's changing. What can change maybe is the mindsets we bring to it. Go.
I love that. And you're totally right. You're totally right. Kids are online. My 2-year-old knew how to get into my iPad just by watching me. Yeah. He's 5 now. The second born, my Halloween devil kiddo, was on the iPad, learned how to do it before I taught him how to do it, while his big brother wasn't interested until he was interested. He's 2 years older. It's really interesting to think about, like, the lessons that we teach. I was a coach before I came to my job that I am right now. In that position, I went into classrooms and was teaching media literacy things, lessons from Common Sense Media. And yes, love it. Perfect. I love those lessons and I love chatting with them. And then I was like talking with a 6th grade group about Facebook. And they're like, what are you, a grandma? And I was like, what?
The shade.
They were already in the TikTok and all the other things. And Steve just joined TikTok. My Steve just joined TikTok.
I did. And it's scary.
Yeah. I totally agree. And, I think that one of the things that we also had in the back of our mind, when I did get my degree in literature, like focusing on children's literature, one of the really interesting things that they talk about sort of in critical studies of children's literature is the fact that, like, children's literature isn't just about children, right? Because somebody has to provide the book to the kid. So it's going to be the teacher, it's going to be the librarian, it's going to be the parent, it's going to be an older sibling, it's going to be somebody else that's going to make that decision to put that in front of the kid. And at the same time, we recognized, especially, I think as parents, like my daughter is just about to turn 14. So when we started this book, she was 11, I want to say. And every single day I would think to myself, I have no idea how to talk to her about this stuff. Like I am really, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, honey, let's have a conversation about Facebook. Like, she was just like, face what? Like, what is that? I've never even heard of that. Like, have you heard of, it was TikTok or Instagram or whatever happens to be hot now. In 5 years, it'll be something else entirely that we haven't even, is not even on the horizon at this point. So part of what we were doing in writing the book is we were just really trying to create an opportunity to have that sort of like that cross generational conversation, right? This is absolutely the kind of book, if you have a 8 or 9-year-old and you're like you have like a book that you read at bedtime, this would be like a perfect one for that. You get to the end of the chapter, there's the puzzle, you can talk about it, you can argue about it, you can ask about it, and you can kind of, you can have that conversation, right? Or if you're a teacher in the classroom, you could teach the whole book, or you could just pull out a single chapter on a topic that you think might be relevant to what your particular, students are going for. But the conversation that we're creating there is the important thing. And I'm realizing that we did not actually say what this book is about. But Graham and Grant Save the Summer. What does that mean? I kind of want to throw this to Steve because he's so much better at doing this than I am.
Dan's much better. I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if I'm any good, but I'll give it a try. So Graham and Grant Save the Summer is basically a story about 3 kids from Brooklyn who find out that their summer camp that they were going to go to, they were excited to go to, is closed. And they are unhappy to hear this. And their mom is thrilled because for their mom, it means that they're going to go visit their grandparents. The grandparents are kind of estranged. They've been traveling the world. They don't really know them other than like getting cards on their birthdays every year, but they never spent time with them. And mom's like, this is great. They are going to have a screen-free, tech-free summer, and it's going to be wonderful. But I don't know if you could see. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if not, you Google Graham and Grant, you'll see there's a picture of a family, 3 children, and some grandparents in front of an island. And in the middle of the island, there's this giant green skyscraper. It's huge because the thing about the island that they're on is that it was founded by a mysterious man named Barnaby Babel, who built this giant tower that gives free, hyper-fast Wi-Fi to everyone. Then he vanished. That's a little bit part of the plot. It gets, Steve, when you get to the later chapters, you'll find out a little bit more about what might have happened to Barnaby Babel and how.
Oh no, not spoilers, not spoilers.
No spoilers. But the entire chapter, the entire book takes place on this like island full of like whimsical, weird characters who sort of like live like right at the edge of the internet. And many of them, just like us adults, like think they know what they're doing. Graham and Gran think that they are masters of the internet, and sometimes they have great ideas, and sometimes they have less great ideas. Right? Sometimes they share information. They have a social media platform called Rip Rap. Sometimes they get all their news and information from Rip Rap, and it steers them in a direction that may not make sense. Sometimes. D'Angelo, the middle child of our trio, gets a lot. He loves conspiracy theories, and it turns out he's been on social media has realized he likes conspiracy theories, and so that's his main news source. Is aliens built the pyramids, and that's all he hears over and over again. He gets in a big argument with Gran about it because he's like, you say to check multiple sources. I've got multiple sources telling me aliens built the pyramids. So what's the deal? So the whole book is designed to kind of like treat these different ideas one by one in a way that you could do with your class. And yeah, there's a teacher's guide, like get it free online, like you could do that. Or just like sitting bedside with your child, doing what I used to do with my dad with Encyclopedia Brown. Like, we're going to read the story. We're going to try to figure it out. In each chapter, a character comes and gives you a hint if you're not sure. And then there's a conclusion that kind of tells like at least what we think is the solution, but we also want to recognize that there's more than one. You know, I did a talk at a school recently, and in one of the chapters that you're essentially evaluating like how you know a website might be worth doing some extra work to scope out, like might be dubious. And kids had all kinds of ideas. Some of them were in the chapter, and some like, wow, that's good. Next edition of this book, we're going to add that in. And that's exactly what we want. So Dan and I like to say, like, we probably when we this book, we started writing it for our kids, but it's really written for your kids too. Like, we want this, we just want this in the world for families to be able to have these kinds of conversations with kids in a way that's fun and not like, you're not the, Dan said this best, like not the equivalent of like me trying to sit backwards in a chair and like talk like real to you if you're 10, like, but instead like playing into the things that sort of were the most magical for us. And that's the power of story and imagination. I don't think it'd surprise either of you to know, like, if we're talking pedagogy, right? Stories are psychologically privileged. We remember more stuff from stories. And it's also just a heck of a lot more fun. So that was kind of our thinking behind how we structured this book. And without giving too much away, it's all about the adventures that these 3 siblings have while on this island off the coast of Maine, sometimes with their grandma and grand, sometimes off on their own, and all the fun, quirky, weird, and surprising inhabitants and denizens of this island.
As I was reading it and now hearing you both talk about it, I almost picture this book existing like as a class set in a classroom, and how that would look vastly different than how reading looked in previous years. So when I was a kid, they passed out the class set, right? And it was almost like painfully so. My teacher would be like, round robin, whose turn is it to read? And growing up, I wasn't that good of a reader, right? Like when I was like in 4th, 5th grade. So I would do the math, be like, wait, what part of the book am I going to read? And I'll be like sweating bullets, be like, wait, are there any words I don't know? And, you know, I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't have
And you're not paying attention at all to anything else that anybody else is reading because you're worried. I was the anxious kid. So I was reading and rereading what I thought was going to be my part before it even came to me. And it was the textbook though, because we only read like part of the Hatchet and part of something else and the Hatchet's the only one that I remember because it was such a good story. So you're right. Good stories are what you remember, and the lessons that you learn from those good stories stick with you longer because it's connected to like emotion, if you can connect it to humor, if you connect it to fear, you're going to remember it. So yeah. Also, I just want to point out that I love that you two go back and forth and compliment each other, because that's the opposite vibe that Steve and I.
No, I complimented you in 2023. That's something that I did. So like going back to this though, like I just look, this is such a flexible book, to where like if you're the teacher teaching this book, like think about like the levels of like, you know, DOK that you can explore, collaboration, like you can build, like I can just picture someone building a whole project like real world learning with all this as well. I just, like, again, just well done. Like I just envision this in a classroom, and I can see how everyone, including the adult in the room, would just thrive.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, every single chapter has a built-in opportunity for, you know, something that's bigger than just reading, right? You know, the collaborative aspect of like, okay, let's figure out this problem now that we've arrived at the end. Something that also sort of motivates rereading, motivates paying attention once you realize that some of the stuff that you're hearing is going to come up again later. And I really relate to what you're saying, Steve, because I was that kind of kid too. I was the kid that, you know, was, and Steve knows this because he would sit next to me and be annoyed that I was doing this. Like I hadn't read the book and I was like flipping through the pages like really quick, trying to find like something I could talk about, you know. So yeah. So I mean, it was, you know, it was written with that idea in mind. I think because, you know, we both were, you know, we have, I don't know, almost 40 years of teaching experience between the two of us. You know, the classroom is a place that we love, that we feel deeply about, that we understand, you know, pretty well, Steve really well and me pretty well. And you know, we were imagining what it would look like to have that book in that setting, and really trying to help teachers out. Because we were them, and when you don't have those kind of resources and you're just, you know, reinventing the wheel every single time, it can get tough. So this is also our you know, neither one of us is in the classroom anymore, sadly. So this is a little bit also like our love letter to teachers and, you know, English teachers and teaching and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the whole hope here is that this translates to, if you are like, gosh, like I'm not sure what to teach or how to teach it or how to go about this, like this book will help you do it. Because essentially, and again, like you could walk in and say, great, we're going to read this chapter. You're going to have some time. We're going to read all the way up to like before the hint, like right to the puzzle. You're going to discuss it in small groups. And if your small group gets stuck, then great, turn the page. You know, in pedagogy speak, it's a scaffold. We're going to have a character give you a hint. Talk about it a little bit more. Let's talk about a whole class. Let's see what we decide, and then let's read the end of the chapter. Like it's like an easy, and I don't want to say easy as in like not like powerful, because we know from research, like the cool, you know, not to be too nerdy. The other thing I like to write about is pedagogy and instruction. So I'll talk about it all day. But we know from research that like even if you have a classroom where kids are thinking nonstop. Right, I'm thinking about English classrooms in specific right now, which is where I read most of my research. Right, if you have a classroom where kids are thinking and thinking and thinking, they still will not see the same kind of achievement gains and success as if you have that same classroom, but kids are also talking. And too often kids aren't getting the chance to talk in class. And the hope is like, we didn't want to just write a book that talks to you. We wanted to write a book that you talk back to, and that you talk to peers about, and that you build intellectual community and fellowship around. And that is the goal, because that's what we wanted in our own classrooms. Dan is very humble, but he's a man who's doing it not just as an educator, as a social worker, but also amongst our friends. Like he's the person you have come in the room, and suddenly we're all talking about this cool topic that we never would have thought about, because Dan posed a question to the group, and we all leave the room smarter because of of it. That's school at its best, right? Those are the days for me, those are the days I went home and I'm like, I taught today, capital T taught, like something, the needle moved. There's other days where you're like, what happened? I thought we were doing well and I read the exit tickets and oh my God. But the days where you're like, we really got into it. We really moved some hearts and minds. We really I learned something about Hamlet that I never thought before. Like those were the days that I just felt super pumped. And we want that for every class and for every kid and for every teacher. And that was kind of what we were thinking about when we structured the book the way we did.
Is there, have either of you or do you share out resources that is coupled with this book? And I'm not just talking study guides. I'm talking about resources that teachers can use if they were to use this book in their classrooms.
Steve, they said that they have a teacher guide that's free.
Oh, they did. See, I'm that kid. I'm that kid today.
Fine, be that kid. We love it. They wanted to
So
go to
I do want to know what's in the teacher guide then. So
Yeah.
That's the
what could
better
we
question.
find?
Thank you, Sophie.
We'll talk all day about this. We love this teacher guide. We do have a list of sites at the end. I think Common Sense Media is one of them for additional places you can find material. But we have a glossary. We have chapter by chapter. Here's a summary of the chapter. Here's a skill that's focused on the chapter. Here's 5 extra questions you could ask if you're really into this chapter and you don't want the party to end after that first discussion. Here's 5 more things. Sometimes, and Dan's the master of this. We would plan things into a chapter where listen, most of this chapter is on lateral reading, which is just fancy media literacy speak for look at other sources. Don't just trust the first time you look at a web page. See if you can find it corroborated elsewhere independently, right? But maybe that's what the chapter's about. But we also tucked in a couple of other interesting side paths you could go down if you wanted to. And our guide includes questions about all of that. Plus, we have some fun illustrations, some early cover art ideas and things like that we wanted to just share as an Easter egg for anyone who was really into Graham and Gran.
Totally.
So yeah, did I hit it all, Dan? Also, our content.
One of the things about it is it's a book about media literacy, and you can use it to teach media literacy. We also we think we wrote a pretty good book. As a book, we really did not want one of those educational texts that only works on an educational level. We wanted something that was well written, and we think we got there. We worked really, really hard to get it to the right level of quality. But what that means is things like character development, things sort of a psychological insight. And so the teacher's guide has questions that are related to the media literacy aspects. It's got a glossary, it's got all that kinds of things, but it also has questions that allow you as a teacher of literature or of humanities to continue building those skills and those concepts that your students are probably encountering with other texts as well. So if you go from reading a Hatchet, which is just that book's awesome, right? Everyone remembers that one. So good, right? But there's a lot of character development in there. There's a lot of sort of imagery and symbolism and all this good stuff going on. And then you get to Graham and Gran, you don't have to just forget that stuff exists. It's still there in a sillier, more media literacy focused package. But I would say that there is also that stuff in there that sort of allows you to expand beyond to sort of general reading related literacy type, concepts that you would want to emphasize no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and Steve, just for your podcast listeners, since this is year one, the other resource we can offer is ourselves. And what I mean by that is this is year one. So if there's someone listening and they're like, you know what, I am going to do this with my class, they can reach out. hello@grahamandgram.com is an email that will reach out to Dan and I. And if you're like, I read this book with my 6th graders, we read it as a class text, Dan or I will pop by for a 30-minute Q&A over Zoom. Just to be part of your community and be helpful in any way that we can. We really want kids to get to experience this. We are very hopeful, as Dan said, that if they do, they're going to fall in love with it. We really hope they do. And if they don't, we love the feedback too. We're here for it all. But we know what it's like to be a teacher and do a book with your kids. And I always used to feel like authors were hard to reach or could be not all of them, but a lot of them can feel inaccessible, especially when you're young. So if there's a class out there and they're like, we're going to do this as a class, I'm like, wow, you took a chance on this book with us. So let us know, and we'll pop by on Zoom and answer questions about the book or writing or media literacy or our favorite foods, whatever your students want to talk about. Like, we want to make sure that we really are walking the walk, and that we're talking, and we want to be here for anyone who's also here for Graham and Gran.
Yeah.
And their kids, most of all.
Right. I cannot. I'm so excited for the moment that a kid tells us that our solution at the end of the chapter is a terrible solution and they have a much better one, like that that kind of thing. And it probably will be better. You know what I mean? Like they're the ones living it. So yeah, I mean that's yeah, we absolutely would love to come in, virtual, you know, whatever is appropriate, and you know, whatever people want.
And Dan, I haven't heard that, but I haven't told you this story yet. My wife is a friend, and her kids are reading it, and the younger one is like there's like two siblings, and one is like a little bit older than the age range of the book. She's like, you know, just a couple years older, but the younger one is right in the middle grades reading age, and he has been using it to, I don't know, I don't want to say torment his sister, but he's just like, I don't find your claims credible, and you have other verification, and apparently it's become like a thing in their house. And I'm like, oh, please, like, have your friend like write this down, shoot me an email, because like that's like my favorite thing of the week, because I grew up with a sibling, and that's 100% how I would have viewed. I would have been like, oh, like, well, I don't know. We have to independently verify what you're saying, because I'm not sure I trust you as a source.
So we did end up being able to write a book about how to be annoying. If you
there you go.
want to torment your older siblings, go ahead and read Graham and Gran. You'll find ways to do it.
I just thought that was a great next line for me to use on Steve. I don't think your claim is credible.
Oh, please don't do that. Because depending on what it is, I have no evidence. Or probably a very loose claim. So man, this has been a whole lot of fun. I'm learning a lot, particularly about all your resources that I learned directly from Sophie a moment ago. But I'm super pumped for both of you. And you know, like, writing a book is something that I feel like Sophie and I, not together, I don't know if that should happen together, but something that Sophie and I both like, that's like kind of on our list of things to do. But I am, again, just super grateful for you coming on the show and sharing everything that is Graham and Gran and media literacy. As we wrap up the show, though, we always end the show with that one question that we ask, and maybe we've already touched on it, right? And so feel free to bring anything back, and maybe we'll start with Stephen first. But you know, like right now, with the work that you're in, the things that you've done, and from your own vantage point, like what should we all be talking about? What is top of mind or under the hat in education right now?
I knew you were going to ask this question. I actually like wrote down like 4 things, and then I lost a sheet of paper I wrote them on. So you're really going to get top of the mind. One of them, the big one's AI, right? Like AI was out for like a week, and then all of a sudden people were online. They're like, I'm a professor, an expert in AI. I'm like, hey, this thing like ChatGPT has been out for like 10 days, and now you're like, let me tell you what to do with your students. And I'm like, I don't know. So I know you've talked about like tech on this podcast. I think that's a big one that's just going to keep, and it's going to keep changing every month, because every month I learn about some new thing, and I have to reevaluate whether this new thing is actually a good thing or a bad thing, or an okay thing if used well, but dangerous if not used well. Like that's one. The other, of course, again, I'm as a literacy person, like I don't think that the conversation around the power of knowledge and text complexity has ended. I think the conversation has shifted a little bit, but there's so much opportunity for us to continue meeting kids where they are and helping them just like get better faster, as a phrase that we use in my organization, like just in terms of their own ability to like not just like understand a difficult text, but to find joy in it, and to find themselves in it, and to feel part of a broader intellectual community that is the humanities, and just like feel successful. And I think that like there's been understandably a lot of stories about sort of our recovery from the pandemic and how it's not going great. And it's honestly, it's not nationally, but there are a lot of bright spots. There are a lot of things that we can do. I don't know if I know people used to talk about accelerating learning. I think it's more about like, how can we get back to the things that get us all out of bed in the morning for our kids? How do we get back to building that and doing it with them in a way that they can feel full ownership of it? And I think after, a couple of years of trying to rebound, I think we're actually in a spot where we might be able to do a little bit more of that and do it in more research-based ways than we were doing before. So an easy one and then a long, windy one, which is kind of what you expect from me when I'm speaking extemporaneously.
I love it. I love it.
That was great.
Yeah, no, love all of that. Like, I love the point of just like, let's just be happy to go to school. Like, and I never really thought, because like we get so wrapped up of like student outcome data, and not to say those things aren't important, like they're important, right? And they're a piece
But if
of
they're
it.
not happy in the building, then none of that other stuff's really gonna
Yeah,
do
Yeah,
anything.
you need to layer everything on this like beautiful, joyful culture where like being smart is cool and being wrong is not scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
That it's hard to do, right? It's easy for me to say that and be like, okay, we'll go out and do it, right? It's really, really hard work, right? Like the teachers are out there doing heaven's work with kids every day to build that for them, so they can build those kind of beautiful environments. And the nice thing is, once it gets started, and this is not just my opinion, this really is research-based, we can put it in the show notes, like reading achievement and motivation are like mutually reinforcing. Actually, once you start to feel like you're succeeding, you tend to be more motivated, right? I always joke around, it's the reason that I'm not on a basketball podcast right now, because I haven't experienced nearly as much success trying to like hit a 3-pointer. Like, it just doesn't happen for me, right? But if it did, if I was like sinking them right from half, like, yeah, I'm going to practice basketball a little bit more. There's something going on here. It's part of who I am. And that's what we want to build for kids. We want to build like what folks call a reading self-concept, right? That like they see themselves as like readers and thinkers. It's part of who they are. And we can build that in our classrooms.
I have a book idea. The book just needs to be this. Just all quotes from Steven. Like, it's like every like couple seconds, I'm like, oh, that's a great quote. I'm like, that needs to be a shirt or a billboard or something somewhere.
I mean, is he not like, he's like the most, I mean, he's so inspiring. He is a very, very inspirational dude. And
I think part of it is that the first name is what makes that happen.
That's right. Steve's are psychologically privileged. When you hear
quality name,
that guy knows what's going on.
And
it's got to have the pH. As I'm doing an audible eye roll over here, it's got to have the pH in it.
I was waiting. I'm like, Sophie is going to have some sort of rebuttal or.
Oh, it's all about having a pH in your name. I see that. There you go. Sophie and Steven.
This is so perfect. Dan,
what's top of mind of education for me? I have to go after that. I don't. Okay. So. We are talking about AI, and I want to take it in a slightly different direction and think about what that means for teachers, not just what that means for our classroom, our kids, but what it means in terms of, I think that sometimes as teachers, we're really in the trenches, and it's just a day-to-day struggle to get that education done, to interact with all of the different stakeholders that we have, parents, administrators, you name it. And over time, there's a tendency to kind of build some bad habits, some shortcuts that will work sometimes, but those shortcuts will cut some kids out because they just it's a reflex instead of a thoughtful process for each individual kid. And one of the things that's interesting to me about AI is, for all that's good about it and for all that's bad about it, it's definitely shaking things up tremendously. It's really forcing teachers to reconceptualize, like ed tech, like it's all really forcing teachers to reconceptualize what it means to interact with their students, what it is that they are giving to their students, what it is that they are getting from their students. We can't, there's no part of the classroom right now that, like, the assignment that you assign has to change because of the resources that are available. The way that you read and evaluate and assess the assignments that are coming in has to change because of the resources that the kid had available. The conversation you're having about, again, like what we say, like media literacy is literacy. There's really no difference, right? And so, what does it mean, say, to be an English teacher, right? It's not really about the English anymore. It's about this like huge global world of facts and invention, and helping kids negotiate that. And at the heart of it, there's this question about how do we stay relevant? How do we be relevant? How do we make our classrooms a relevant space for kids? And I think that AI has kind of blown the top off the idea that what you can do is you can find exactly that right book that's going to speak to every kid, or exactly that right assignment that's going to speak to every kid, because the kid can go into a large language model and create for themselves a resource that's more relevant feeling than anything you could ever do. But like, you can create relevance in the classroom, right? The classroom can be the place of relevance. It doesn't just have to be about finding sources that are pre-relevant. It's about creating relevance. And I think that ed tech and AI actually have a big role to play in making that happen. And I'm really excited and interested in seeing how it goes.
Yeah. What does the future hold? Like, so my daughter, she's second grade right now.
Mm-hmm.
I often think, I'm like, what is my baby girl going to be experiencing as a senior in high school, right?
Yeah.
Like or college, if she decides to go, like what does all that look like? So Dan, like all that resonates with me as I often think about, as a Star Wars nerd, what does the future look like? Will it look like that? Hopefully not all of it. Hopefully we don't have a Death Star. That would be bad. But I do appreciate both of you, Dan and Steven, jumping on. I learned a whole lot. I do want to share for anybody that's watching the pod right now. I do know that we have some people up on the Insta. Let me go ahead and add this to the stage here. Yes. So Steven's holding the book. I'll go ahead and do the same. Graham and Gran, Save the Summer. Sophie.
I do have it. It's upstairs.
I think your dog ate it.
It's in a drawer right next to my chair. I know exactly where it is. I just don't have it with me.
It is good. It is good. There's no judgment here. But just wanted to post this up. This will be in the show notes. So Steven and Dan, like all the links will be in there. Anybody that's watching, listening, feel free to give this a go. And I'm having fun reading it, and I'm almost 40. So ish, like coming up on 39 this month. It's getting scary. But excellent read. I'm having a lot of fun, and just I think as an adult, I just appreciate, like, ooh, it's all of this is being done so well and so effortlessly with all the learning. But for those that are going to be tuning in next week, know that we're doing a slightly different format here on the pod. And so for episode 32 next weekend, we are doing a pre-record just of how things are laying out. My good friend, Ashley, is Arlo. She's a Q person. She loves Q. She's out in Southern California. I've been on her podcast, so I'm sure we'll be chatting about that. But this one's not going live. So there will be Sophie and I are doing a pre-record next weekend. But what is going live for those that are, it's kind of a Q weekend next weekend, because we have, this one's going to be out of control. We have John Carippo on the show. John is a good friend of mine. He is someone I look up to. A lot of people look up to him. Edu protocol guy. And why am I running this banner still? Let me turn this off. There we go. And so John's going to be on. Super pumped for this. And, we're going to be talking about Edu protocols, teaching, the work that he's doing right now, and could not be more thrilled to have John on my show, on our show. And so that's what's happening as we move forward into this month, this crazy month of October, which is the best month.
The best month of the year. Hands down, it is the best month of the year. It was my favorite one when teaching too. And not just because Steve was born in it, but it was my favorite month to teach in because you got your kids. It's starting to cool down because I'm in West Virginia. And you can start really getting into the good, like you got a culture in your classroom and get into the really good, complicated things in your classroom. So that was just really it's my favorite month to teach. Sorry. You can now end the show, Steve.
I was always teaching the French Revolution during October. So right during Halloween, and French Revolution, as we know, is like creepy and weird. It's just perfect. Stars align. Awesome. All right. Thank you, friends. For those that are watching, listening, continue to show that support. Really appreciate all the follows, people subscribing, all of that fun stuff. And we're just here, just trying to, amplify voice and to learn alongside the rest of the world and those that decide to tune in. Until next time, friends, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Talk soon.